Let's get the views now of former Defence Attaché Simon Diggins, who joins us. And Simon, is the problem that this is overstepping that dividing line between defensive and offensive capabilities?
That is one of the arguments that's put forward, and certainly in the past, President Biden's been very careful and very measured in terms of trying to, if you like, calibrate which weapons to supply to Ukraine and which ones not. You'll recall the very prolonged debate over the supply of tanks, which only basically resolved last week, and clearly the issue around the F-16 is more sensitive to them in that respect. I wouldn't necessarily characterise any weapon system, though, as offensive or defensive. It's really a question of how they're used. And I suppose the concern that the Americans have got that these will be used for deep offensive operations into Russia itself, which is why, for example, they have refused to provide some of the rocket systems, which again the Ukrainians have been asking for, the longer range version of the rocket system they have at the moment, the one that's got a range of 185 kilometres, which would allow the Ukrainians to strike well into Russia itself. So that's one of the sensitivities, I think, around these issues.
But of course, the reality is Ukraine already has Soviet-era MiGs, which have got the range to actually reach the Russian mainland. So one wonders, whether it's just the White House being overly cautious, overly sensitive.
No, I think that there is an element of that. And I mean, I wouldn't disagree more with that at all. I mean, I think they are being oversensitive. And I think we've also got to make our mind up, are we actually going to allow the Ukrainians the resources to win and defeat the Russians, or just going to bring them to kind of like a score draw, which is kind of, I think, where the thing is heading at the moment. There's also a practical issue, of course, is that the Ukrainians do not have experience on these weapon systems, and it would take several months, even if there was a clear decision tomorrow, to bring a kind of cadre of pilots, engineers, logisticians, etc., up to speed on flying these aircraft. So there are some practical considerations as well, but I think it is much more around the kind of psychology of this and also the kind of signalling that's going on. But it does leave the Ukrainians in a very difficult position vis-a-vis the Russians and what they're going to do for the future.
What would they have done? I mean, one can't imagine maybe Ukrainian pilots getting into dogfights with Russian pilots, even if it's over Ukraine, because clearly the threat at the moment seems to identify these Iranian drones coming through, and then the missiles being launched as well, hitting infrastructure such as power stations and so on. And a fighter jet wouldn't be much good at that.
No, but I think it's a kind of package of things, and you package together the air power with these newly supplied tanks, with artillery, and electronic warfare, good communication, etc., you create a much more effective package. And I think that's one of the key things about this. We are all, not unreasonably, often very focused on very specific weapon systems. What I think really counts is how does the package look together, and can they put together a coherent force that they can use to either defend more effectively or to conduct offensive operations as required.
OK, so without them, your assessment would be a score draw, as you say, more likely than an outright win for Ukraine.
I mean, it's a very crude way of putting it, and that's not a good result. But that's kind of where we're heading, I think, at the moment.
OK, thank you very much indeed for joining us, Simon. Colonel Simon Diggins, former Defence Attaché, with his view.